everybody, Tony D with a Hollywoke hot take on Bubba Wallace. Now, Bubba is not really a Hollywood guy, but he is a celebrity, and he made the rounds because of what happened to him, or didn't happen to him, as the case may be. Apparently, if you haven't heard the story, this is what happened. He went into the garage. You know, he's a race car driver for Nascar. He's the first black one, I think, or like the top black one. I don't know. So something very historical about him being black. Anyhow, he goes into, and this is right after they banned the Confederate flag in NASCAR, but he goes into his garage and he sees a rope that looks like a noose, and he freaks out and says, oh my God, somebody put a noose in here. And then the FBI is called in, and 15 agents go in, and they determine definitively that it wasn't, that it was not fake, but that the rope was in there at least a year before he ever moved into the garage, and there was no way anybody could have predicted he would have been in that particular garage. And there's not, I think he's the only black NASCAR driver, so, I mean, what were the odds? And what I think this is, and I've talked about this before, and really this is a concept other YouTubers, Sticks and Hammer, turned me on to, is a moral panic. That everybody's so hyped up about race, they're seeing racial things everywhere. And, this goes back to Black Lives Matter and the continuing riots that they're pushing along with Antifa. They just don't want to stop this because everything to them is about race and division. And mostly about Marxism too, because they have openly admit that they're trained Marxists. And trained Marxists want to destroy everything so they can write history and say history the right way. But I think Bubba, there's two scenarios. I think the least likely scenario is Bubba's a very cynical player and wanted to parlay his victimhood into some sort of book deal or, more promotion or whatever. That's pretty possible. There's a lot of famous people that are very cynical and they're interested in money. And look, this guy's everywhere now. I never even heard of this guy before that. Or he could just be caught up in the moral panic and he saw something that looked like a noose. He freaked out. He called somebody. And before you know it, he realized, oh, crap, I shouldn't have called these guys. But then he doubled down on it and said something like, no, I know a noose when I see it. But the FBI determined the rope had been there at least a year and nobody could have known that he would use that particular garage. And think about it. NASCAR is a multi-million-dollar industry. Those garages hold millions of dollars worth of equipment. Those cars are worth a lot of money. They're going to have a state-of-the-art security system with video cameras. You're telling me some racist like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, not that Tom Cruise is racist, but, like a racist acting like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible lowered himself down on a rope, and none of the sensors set off just so he could set down the noose in hopes that he might offend some black guy in the future. It's stupid on its face. And it's quite possible somebody just tied the noose because they were bored. The noose has been used in the Wild West for a long time. And it is a knot that people tie. Now, do people intend to use it for racism? Yeah, some people do. Do some people just tie knots? Yeah, they do. I've seen people do it. I think in this case, I didn't see the rope he saw. They're pointing to these door handles. They kind of look noose-like. But, either way, the thing's been there for a year. It seems very unlikely that it had anything to do with racism. The interesting thing, though, was I was at work and we were talking about this thing and saying, oh, yeah, it's fake, whatever. And one of my coworkers was like, no, it wasn't fake. And, he jumped in the conversation and was like, yeah, and, it's been a lot of lynchings over the years. People are scared. And I'm like, well, there hasn't been a lynching in well over 50 years in the United States. I think it's been longer than that. And he's like, no, there's some recently. And he pulled up the headlines on his phone, and I said, there is no way there's been a lynching in the United States this year. And he said, well, there were 6 people who were shot and hung from trees. I said, there is no way that happened either. I said, we would have heard about that. It's like, no, these 6 black people were shot and hung from trees. The article he was pointing to was actually about, there were 6 pictures of shooting victims, and they were hung from a tree, maybe inappropriately, but it sounded to me like it was a big accident, like somebody intended to display the shooting victims, and they hung them from trees, and the optics on it made everybody go crazy because, again, we're in a moral panic, and people immediately assumed it was some sort of racist thing. So I don't know. I didn't read the whole article, but he clearly didn't read any of the article, in my view. And, you know, he was convinced that lynchings are happening today. And I was like, that's just not true. If a lynching was happening today, CNN would cover it nonstop 24/7 until the presidential election was over. Because that's their narrative. America is racist, and Donald Trump is the cause. Blah, blah, blah. You could write the rest. And so this is part of that moral panic. And I said to him, I think you're in a moral panic. People are all hyped up about race, so they're seeing racial stuff in everything. In Teddy Roosevelt's statue. In, you know, what next? Sandwiches. They're racist. If you have put mayo on a sandwich, you're racist. I mean, that's where we're headed. But I think this is more, the panic is meant to be pushed by BLM and Antifa in order to sow division and tear down more of these statues and history and undermine everything. I think we got to reach a point where we got to get a grip on this stuff. I don't know what the answer is there, except to say, you know, don't believe everything you read. If you see a headline, understand that the way the news works now, you know, back in the day during the Satanic Panic, in the 80s, it was about selling newspapers and ratings on a TV show. Ratings are still important, but it's also about clicks. On the internet, clicks are king. You get a lot of clicks, it doesn't matter. So news organizations will frequently put up a bombastic headline that's not even true and then change it later. Because if you're an advertiser and you pay for 1 million clicks and you're guaranteed 1 million clicks within a certain period of time and it gets down to the wire, they might just do that. In fact, Tim Pool talks about that all the time, that outrage clicks are a thing that these news organizations actually go for. And they don't care that it hurts their credibility, and it does, but that takes a long time to wear down. I mean, even now, people watch CNN, right? They think it's a reliable news source, but, you know, they're willing to do this to get money, in my view. This is what they do. So that headline about 6 shooting victims hanging in a tree was there to go, oh my God, click. And then it turns out to be 6 pictures of shooting victims hanging in a tree. And then you go, oh, well, that was kind of misleading, but it's too late. They got your click. They got your money. Well, not your money, but they got the advertisers' money. So maybe it's time for advertisers to pull their advertising from places like that. But then again, that works, right? Because the more eyes you have on your ad, the more clicks you get on your little banner thing or whatever. So it's a real problem. Credibility doesn't necessarily translate into more clicks. Maybe in the long term it does. But a lot of people working on the internet, they don't care about the long term. They care about the now. They care about the money now. I worked for a site. You know, they want to do this outrageous comedy site, right? So we were writing all these outrageous things. And they had a mandate to do it for like 6 months. And if they could make the money work, great. And if not, they just shut down the site. So that's the way some of this stuff works. It's the way some of these news sites will work. They'll start a news site, and they'll say all this outrageous crap, and if they get enough hits, great. They'll make it work and make money. If they don't, they just shut down the whole site and start something new. But what you can do as your average news consumer is be very wary about these things. Just be very wary and understand if you hear a headline that's too good or too juicy to be true. It probably isn't. And when you finally click and drill down and realize you've been misled, maybe send an email to the website and say, hey, I feel misled here. This is wrong, and you shouldn't do this, and I'm going to think twice about ever clicking on your site again. You know, people listen to their patrons. You know, if enough people do that, if enough people complain, maybe they'll set the bar a little higher and not do that to us. Anyhow, it's just a suggestion. And that is your Hollywoke hot take.